We're going to try a game of imagination involving this small group of cards. And Jolie, I'm going to let you use your imagination to make this all work. I'd like you to begin by imagining that there are 4 cards there. That's the easy part because there are 4 cards there. I'd like you to imagine that they're the 4 queens. Still easy. They're the 4 queens. But here's where you really have to use your imagination, because look, I will remove 2 of the queens. Now you tell me, did I remove the reds or the blacks?
The reds.
That's amazing, she's right. Look, I'll turn one of those red queens face up, and then I'll put them both back inside the packet. So now there's 1 red queen face up, but is it the heart or the diamond?
The heart.
That's fantastic. She's right again. Now look, here's where imagination meets up with reality, because in reality there is 1 queen reversed in the packet. And it's the Queen of Hearts. Now, that's pretty amazing, but I don't want you to give me credit for the wrong thing. Because you might think that when I was picking up the cards to spread them, somehow I really quickly and surreptitiously turned over the Queen of Hearts as quickly as I could. Well, to prove that that's not what I did, I took the Queen of Hearts from a completely different deck. And in fact, I was so sure that you were going to name the Queen of Hearts, I didn't bother to really bring the other 3 queens at all. That's fantastic. We're going to discuss something I came up with just about 30 years ago. It's called Boave. You can pronounce it B-wave, but you'll be wrong. I'll get into the reasons why it's called Boave in just a bit, but for right now, let's discuss the basic method and then the very small details that make it into something pretty good. There are 4 cards involved. 3 of them are blank facers, and 1 of them is a double index card. That is the Queen of Diamonds on one end, the Queen of Hearts on the other. And at the beginning of the routine, these are all set up so that the Queen is reversed 3rd from the top. What we're going to do is to force the choice of one of the red suits. I'll get into the details of that in a moment. But once the suit is narrowed down to red, the spectator gets a free choice between hearts or diamonds. And then depending on which one he says, that's going to be the queen that we show reversed in the packet. Now, in order to do that, I want the visual to be this. Now, there is some possibility of displaying this in other ways. For example, you can spread the cards on the table. The problem with that is that approximately half the time you're going to spread them this way, which means that the spectator is going to see that queen and the index upside down. Now, lay people can read a card upside down, but it takes an instant to orient that. They're not used to looking at cards upside down. And this is precisely the moment we don't want them thinking about something else. We don't want them saying, that's the Queen of Hearts, I get it. We want them to instantly know it's the Queen of Hearts or the Queen of Diamonds. And it's for that reason that I want to spread the cards in this fashion, and that's the visual I want the spectator to take home, so that at the instant the queen is seen reversed, it's clear which queen it is. The way we get to that situation is by starting with the packet horizontally on the table. And that way, if the Queen of Hearts is named, since that's over on this end to my left, and I simply remember that because the heart is located a little to the left in the body, I pick up the packet using my right hand so that when I swing to this position, the Queen of Hearts is in the necessary location. If I need to show the Queen of Diamonds, I simply pick it up with my left hand so that it naturally rotates so that the Queen of Diamonds is now facing out. I then come around with the right hand, and I'm in exactly that same position for that display pose. From this position, we're going to hit the two kickers, as it were. Once that it has been seen that the named queen is face up, I'll remove this, showing that it comes from a different deck. As I remove it, I turn it so that you never get to see the wrong index on the other end. And then these three are turned over for the surprise resolution that gives you your third climax. So that's the technical stuff. By the way, you might not be sure of the orientation of the packet if you take it out of your wallet or out of your pocket. There are ways that you can fix this. One simple way is to put a mark on the top card. In this particular set, I don't have to have a mark because if you look very carefully, the cards are not printed precisely centered. This border is a little thicker on this end. That's unfortunately true about a lot of currently printed playing cards. So I'm simply giving the off-center an application here that the wider end is where the heart is located. So if I were to take this out of my pocket without remembering the orientation, as soon as I look at the back, I know. So let's talk about the means by which I'm going to force that red information. And the script is really important here. And there are some aspects of this script that nobody seems to ever get right, so I want to emphasize those. You saw this in performance, but let me run through it again. I begin by saying to the spectator, I'd like you to join me in a game of imagination. I'd like to start by having you imagine that there are 4 cards here. That's easy because there are 4 cards here. Now, the whole reason I'm starting this is I want to take this step by step, and I want the spectator to have a very clear understanding of what the materials are. I don't want them asking questions along the way, so I'll take step by step to make sure that they are clear from the outset as to what the premise is. I then say, I want you to imagine that they are the 4 queens. That's still easy because they are the 4 queens. Well, in actual fact, as you know, they're not the 4 queens. But ostensibly, at this point in the presentation, they are. So I'm lying. I resume my patter, and I say, here's where your imagination is put to the test. I want you to imagine that I'm removing 2 of the queens. And I do physical actions to emphasize the idea that I have 2. I say to the spectator, which did I take, the reds or the blacks? And I want to say this in a way that the spectator does not think that he or she has the option of arguing the point. I really don't want the spectator to say, well, you have 1 club and 1 diamond, because that's going to screw up the force. So I deliver this line without an open end to it. It's not an option for the spectator. I'm making it clear there's only a single answer that will suffice, a single type of answer. They are either the reds or the blacks. So the spectator says whichever of those colors is desired, and things proceed a little bit differently depending on which color is named. So if red is named, and this is the most important point of the presentation, I react. If there's only me and the spectator, I'll react to the spectator, but far better is if there's at least one other person or a group, because then I'll react to the group, to the people watching. And my reaction is, wow, he got it right. And I'll say essentially that. So are they the red ones or the black ones? Spectator says red, I say, amazing. That's exactly right. That reaction is what is selling the idea that this is up to the spectator, that the spectator is making the choices, not me. Now let's continue on as if the spectator has said red. I say, look, I will take 1 of the red queens and turn it face up, and then I'll replace them into the packet. That means that at this moment, one of those red queens is face up. Which was it? The heart or the diamond? In this case, the spectator can name either one because, as we know, I can show either the heart or the diamond reversed. So whichever one is named, remember I swing the cards up into this position and I show that. Having done that, I'll swing the cards back to this position. Now the queen is upside down, but the spectators have already seen that it's the queen of hearts or whatever was named, so it isn't a big effort to now be reading it upside down, but that's the best position for me to swing this up and over without flashing the wrong index. And having shown that with the comment, I didn't want you to think this was sleight of hand, that I somehow very quickly turned over the Queen of Hearts, and that's why I took it from a completely different deck. And I cap it off by saying, in fact, I was so sure that you would imagine the Queen of Hearts, I didn't bother to bring the other ones. Trick's over. But now we have to address what happens if the spectator says black when the two cards are initially mimed in the removal. When the spectator says, I think they're the blacks, again, what really sells this moment is saying to the observers, amazing, that's absolutely correct. I'll toss those over here. Now, if I use the word remove prior to this choice, if I'm going to remove two of the queens, if the spectator then says black, I can call back on the word remove, and it seems completely logical that I say I've removed them, therefore will toss them aside. If black is named, I now continue by saying there are two queens remaining, the heart and the diamond. I'll remove one of those. Which one did I remove? And the spectator will say hearts or diamonds. I say I'll put that away as well, which means there's only one queen left, which would be and the spectator, having narrowed it down apparently according to his or her own choices, leaves you with the situation that the only card remaining is either the Queen of Hearts or the Queen of Diamonds. And again, we display as before, and again, we get to the two kickers. The only difference that changes is the wording. If the blacks and the other queen have been thrown away, let's say we've ended here with the Queen of Hearts. I say again, I don't want you to think that this was quickness of the hand and that I somehow very quickly turned over the Queen of Hearts. Therefore, I removed it from a completely different deck. And now, because we've set up a slightly different context, I say, and of course, as far as the other queens, remember we threw those away. So the introduction of the blank face cards, no less surprising in this presentation, but it ties in a little differently to the storyline that leads up to this. Let's talk about a few other things. First of all, let's briefly touch upon the Wave Deluxe set, which Penguin offers you with a variety of additional cards of different colors and different combinations, and you're welcome to play with those as much as you want. The one thing I would point out from my own personal taste, you've been given 3 jokers as an alternative to the 3 blanks. My strong suggestion is you take those 3 jokers and throw them away, or at least use them for a different trick. Because producing jokers at the end of this trick is just simply far less of a moment than revealing 3 blank-faced cards. Jokers are jokers. Blank faces are things that most people have never seen, so there's kind of a shock moment when the blank cards are shown. So as far as I'm concerned, in this trick, the jokers are a step down. They're not a good idea. It's my opinion. A few other things. Let's get back to the name. Why is the trick pronounced wave? The answer is because it is a contraction of the word brainwave. Now, the trick that kind of put that idea on the map was Di Vernon's brainwave, which has roots. It really starts with a trick that was marketed in 1921 by the English dealer Edward Bagshaw, and he had a trick called Reverso, which used some rather insanely gaffed cards that you would be very hard-pressed to make very complicated. After Bagshaw released this deck in 1921, over the next decade or so, there were a variety of versions developed by people such as Judson Brown and Eric Impey, later on Joe Berg, variety of people. Di Vernon jumped in 1930 with an effect that eventually was dubbed the brainwave deck. The Vernon trick, as with these other tricks, involved a named card being the only one reversed in a deck of playing cards. In 1930, when Vernon came up with this, he was pretty guarded with it. He performed it for lay audiences, and he showed it and shared it with very, very few magicians. But one of those was a friend of his named Paul Fox, based in Colorado. And when he showed it to Paul Fox, Fox said, you know, with just a slight tweaking, you could add an extra kicker to the effect that the reverse card turns out to have a different back color than the rest of the deck in play. And Vernon liked that, so he added the Fox kicker to the effect of brainwave. In 1938, brainwave, with its full instructions, was published in the Jinx by Anneman, sort of with Vernon's permission. There's a complicated story behind that, but at any rate, in 38 is when the deck became well known, dealers started manufacturing it, and it is around to this day. Now, in the 1950s, packet magic, as we think of it in modern terms, began. And during the 1950s, a variety of magicians started approaching the idea of a brainwave type of effect, where a named card was the only one found reversed in a packet. They started approaching this with a packet of cards rather than a full deck. So Vernon was one of the early explorers of this idea. S. Leo Horowitz, Edward Marlowe, and a number of others. Various different versions and methods, some involving gimmicks, some involving straight cards. I jumped in the 1970s and started playing with versions. Now, in 1978, Carl Fulvis published a premise, which he called Brainstorm. And the idea with Brainstorm was that there was an extra kicker, and the extra kicker was you started with a packet of cards, a name card was the only one reversed. You showed that it came from a different deck using the Paul Fox presentational idea. And then it turned out that the remaining cards were all a different value than the set you apparently began with. So if you said, I have the 4 aces, they named the ace of diamonds, that was the only reversed card, but then the remaining cards were jacks. I thought that was a pretty impressive effect and a good challenge, and worked out a number of methods. And it was about 1988 that I came up with wave, and the name is simply a contraction of the term brainwave, and so it is properly pronounced wave. I've never gotten upset if someone pronounces it B-wave. I just know they didn't hear me pronounce it. When this came out, initially we marketed it only in Japan and in the US in my lectures. But in 1991, I made arrangements with Stephen Minch, and it was marketed internationally, and it did rather well. And over the time that this became a popular trick, many people jumped in with new variations, some good and some not so good. One of the first interesting variations was by John Bannon of Chicago, who came up with a trick called Twisted Sisters, more magic than mentalism. This is a pretty simple effect, and John said, I really like wave, but it's only 1 out of 4. The spectator named one of the queens, and that's the one. And I said, yeah, that's the effect. And John said, well, I think it needs more. And so he developed Twisted Sisters, which involves 8 cards and a kind of transposition concept, and asked my permission to market it, and I gave that permission. People over the years have asked me what I think of Twisted Sisters, and the answer is, I think it's a good trick. I think wave is a great trick. So I think John was able to take a great trick and turn it into a good trick, which is not necessarily the direction you want to go, but there's nothing wrong with that trick. There's another point related to this, and that has to do with the idea of initially displaying the cards as being 4 face-down blue-backed cards, by using an Elmsley count or a Jordan count or something similar. I don't think that's a good idea. It turns this into a magic trick. I like that it's a little piece of mentalism, simple but direct. And if the effect is suddenly that a card magically turns face up, well, then you've complicated the effect, and I don't think you've made it stronger. So I would suggest not doing a false count at the start. One of the things that a number of people came up with almost immediately once Wave started getting circulation was the realization that you can do it without a gimmick. In other words, you can have a genuine queen, no double-ender, from a different deck, reversed in a packet of 3 blanks. And then by adjusting the verbiage, you can force that particular suit by using a little bit more care and a little bit more pushing within the equivocal approach. And that does work. One of the first people to come up with that idea and start using it was Eugene Burger. And Eugene did it that way a fair amount. But he did it that way in order to bust magicians. In other words, he had a very good presentation, and magicians expecting that it was the Wave set were then quite shocked when he revealed the full face of the reversed queen. However, in his actual work, Eugene uses the gimmick version. And at this very moment, if you were to accost Eugene Burger and say, show me the contents of your wallet, among the things in the wallet, you would find a set of Wave cards with the gimmick, because I think it's fair to say that the gimmick version is a better piece of magic. And the reason for that is because the method is more deeply concealed. Of course, you can equivocate a single queen from 4 using just language. Hell, you can do it with a deck of 52 cards. You can get down to a single card, so why not with 4? But in this particular case, the gimmick allows for the equivocal segment to take place in the middle of the selection process. And what that means is that the following choice, after you've gone for color, is completely fair. And in turn, that negates any idea of reverse engineering. It negates any sense that there was steering or direction given, and it makes the results seem much more clean and much more fair. So, by all means, if you want to explore the various verbal machinations that would be required to do it with a straight set of cards, go ahead. But you're going to have to carry around 4 cards anyway if you're going to do the blank faces. So you might as well carry around the gimmick and get yourself a cleaner presentation. That's my idea with this at any rate. Well, I think we have covered a fair amount of history. I think we've covered some details. Again, the issue, there's relatively little handling going on here. This really is a question of how you deliver the script, how you frame the fairness of choice, the fact that whenever possible you push the idea as you are reacting to the spectator's choices by commenting to the bystanders, to the observers, rather than to only the spectator. I'll leave you with one last thought, which is that not infrequently I perform this routine with the spectator and no table. So I have the person hold out his or her hand, and I start off with the cards on the spectator's hand. Now, by the nature of setting this up, I make it clear that they aren't supposed to look at the cards just yet because we're building to something. And if you pick the right person, if you pick someone who isn't really ornery or drunk or both, they're just going to hold the cards for you. When I get to the end display, when I turn this upside down and show its odd back, I drop that onto the spectator's hand. He's not going to turn it over, because this is the shocking part, that it's from a different deck. Plus, I'm not done yet. So I put this on his hand, and just to be sure, if I have any doubts about the spectator, I'll hover with these cards over this so that it's physically difficult for that person to turn the card. But frankly, they're not going to turn the card. And then, having gotten to the next step of the script, I turn these over and toss them onto his hand. The appearance of the blanks is a startling moment. My hands are empty. He's holding everything. He has no need to examine things because everything's in his hands. So the spectator's thought process is, if he's given everything to me to hold, they must be ordinary things. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare, which is exactly why I do. Well, that concludes our discussion of Wave, or in this case, the expanded Wave Deluxe set. I hope you found some interesting things here. I've been doing this for 3 decades, and if you have never tried this, I hope you will. I think you'll be surprised at just how much impact you get out of just 4 cards that can be sitting in your pocket or in your wallet. If you have comments about this, by all means, upload them onto the penguinmagic.com website. We'd love to hear what you think. Hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll talk about more things soon.